Thank you, everybody, for attending. This is Allied Physicians Group, our mental health committee meeting, and our guest lecture today. If you don't know much about Allied, we're a large physicians group without walls, based mostly on Long Island, and we have over 180 clinicians. Because we deal with such a large pediatric population, and as we all know in pediatrics, mental health has the needs of our mental health needs of our patients has exploded. So we're paying a lot of special attention to the mental health of children, more than we ever signed up for. So we're all excited to have lectures and help and continuing our medical education on learning to treat illnesses of mental health nature. And in that vein, tonight, we're very lucky and blessed to have Dr. Jenny Rudetsky join us. Tonight's meeting and lecture is going to be about social media and the effects on children and adolescents, which is a very important topic. It's in the news almost constantly, and we see the effect that it has on our patients. Just to let you know, coming up on September 13th, our next lecture in the series will be on motivational interviewing. That's very important for pediatricians and clinicians to help them understand how to get our patients to understand our mental health advice or advice of any nature, and to understand how we can try to affect that advice whenever possible. And that's going to be Dr. Erica Miller, a world-renowned expert on motivational interviewing, and that's going to be at 8:15 on 9/13. So let me introduce our speaker for today. I'm very happy to introduce Dr. Jenny Rudetsky. Dr. Rudetsky is the David G. Dickinson Collegiate Professor of Pediatrics at the University of Michigan Medical School. She's the director of the Division of Developmental Behavioral Pediatrics and focuses clinically on autism, neurodiversity, and advocacy, as every pediatrician should. Her NIH-funded research examines the use of mobile and interactive technology by parents and young children, parent-child relationships, and child social emotional development. She authored the American Academy of Pediatrics Policy Statements, Media and Young Minds, and Digital Advertising to Children, and is co-medical director of the SAMHSA-funded AAP Center of Excellence on Social Media and Youth and Mental Health. Dr. Rudetsky, we're really happy to have you, and please turn on your camera and take it away. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mark. Thanks so much for the invitation. I'm just going to start to share my screen. And can people hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Yes, great. Thank you. So I'm excited to be giving a talk to a bunch of Long Island pediatricians because I grew up on Long Island. My parents still live in Point Lookout, and I was born at Mercy Hospital. So I'm also grateful to have the opportunity to talk a little bit about our new Center of Excellence on Social Media and Mental Health. It's run through the American Academy of Pediatrics. I'm at University of Michigan, so I'm just one of the co-medical directors along with Dr. Megan Moreno. We were awarded this 5-year grant from SAMHSA, which is the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. So the federal government basically is like, hey, help out with this really, really big, sticky topic. So we've been working really hard to try to get this center off the ground. You'll hear a lot more from us over the summer. And one of our main goals is to train clinicians. So you all are some of our first that you'll be hearing some of our main talking points on this and some of our advice for clinicians. I'd love to hear your feedback and your questions, and especially if I didn't cover things that are bothering you or worrying you on a regular basis. So I will try to leave some time at the end for questions. I do not have any disclosures about social media and mental health. My research funding comes from NICHD, the Boston Children's Digital Wellness Lab, and Common Sense Media, a nonprofit, and I consult for Melissa and Doug Toys, but I'm not going to talk about those today. So today's talk, my goal is, one, that you come away feeling comfortable in understanding the evidence base around links between social media use and youth mental health, differentiating the weak from the stronger evidence and how that would affect your clinical care. Number two, I'm going to dig a little bit into the design features of social media and interactive media. That's part of my research. So I really think it's so important to understand what is so new about the technologies that kids are using and we are using that makes it harder to parent around. And then to translate those into some guidance for patients and families about communication, about balance strategies, about healthy relationships with social media in a way that I hope you'll feel is realistic, is non-panicky, is really practical, and hopefully will resonate with the families you work with. This is in the news quite a lot, so I just wanted to mention the new Surgeon General's advisory on social media and youth mental health that just came out in May. These are the basic summary points, is that he did, involve a pretty good review of the evidence, talking about both the positive and negative impacts that social media has on children and adolescents, around providing positive community and connection, maintaining friendships, supporting identity development, but really concerned about the risks of exposure to extreme, inappropriate, and harmful content on social media, and excessive and problematic use that disrupts important health behaviors. So he really was kind of talking about, like, we don't have enough evidence that this is safe the way we do other products that we have kids use. So calling was a real call for action from policymakers, industry, parents, and youth. And we really appreciated that multi-level call for there to be more done, not just kids and parents changing their behavior, but the whole system trying to do this better. I want to start off just by level setting around what we're talking about when we say social media, because it is so many different platforms and it has changed quite a lot since many of us just started using it. I don't even know what the first social media site was, 6 Degrees. I did not use that. I was in college at that time. Friendster launched in 2002. I remember things like MySpace. And these were very different platforms. If you think about what we know as social media today and what was back then it was kind of like, this is just my webpage where I post updates and people check on me. There was no feed, right? There were no reels. There was not as much user generated content. It was kind of like friends checking in on each other. It was what were called fandoms of like, oh, all the Harry Potter fans go here and all the Dungeons and Dragons fans go here. So very different. Once Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and Snapchat came on and started to have initial public offerings where they had shareholders that they needed to show profits for, that was a game changer. When they started to use algorithms to provide people a feed instead of just kind of following people and getting updates, that was a big game changer. And then TikTok has also been a big game changer just because of the way its algorithm really can predict what you might want to watch next. And that can make it really hard to transition off, and sometimes can lead to kids being recommended more harmful content on multiple sites. So I just want to acknowledge that there's a real history here. It's only been like 15, 20, 25 years where it's okay. It's normal to have a sense of whiplash of like, oh my gosh, I can't even keep up with this research wise. We can't even keep up with this clinically. What are we talking about when we say social media? Many of us might be on some of these platforms, but we don't know all the new ones that are coming out. And this little graph doesn't even show some of the stuff that many of our patients are on, like Reddit. Roblox, I consider a social media site because you do go on there and chat. You can chat with other people. You are kind of socially interactive in the game. Discord, Twitch, YouTube, all of these we should consider as these social platforms where people are generating content, interacting socially. They all have different levels of like privacy settings or ways to kind of have some guardrails around it, but they're all similar in that it's not like watching the Disney Channel where you have a production team that is coming up with a script and hiring a cast and like filming a story. These are all these little bite-sized or long-form user-generated content that doesn't go through the same production quality, and it's also monetized in ways where people want you to watch longer and click longer because they get more ad revenue that way. It's also important to recognize that these technologies are being introduced into our lives at such a faster rate than older technologies do. when I give talks about media and kids, many people are like, oh, yeah, but the printing press really disrupted the lives of people who used oral histories, or the telephone disrupted people who wrote letters to each other. But both of those took decades to centuries to become adopted by all of the population. Whereas if you look at the right side of this graph, this shows things like the cell phone and computer and internet have such a higher slope. They've been adopted so rapidly by our communities. And things like the iPad only took like 80 days to reach 50 million global users. Pokemon Go only took like 19 days to reach 50 million global users. That's because part of the economy behind this is get big fast, grow fast, break things, get to scale, make money. And that means we're not taking a slow, careful pace to say, hey, is this good for kids? What effect is this going to have if you connect everyone in the world? What effect is it going to have if you tweak your algorithm to elevate, the really emotionally enraging stuff? So, one way to talk about this with families is to say it's normal to feel overwhelmed. This is happening really fast. It's really complicated. And all these products didn't take their time to safety check before they were introduced to kids and put in kids' pockets with their cell phones. So it's okay that this feels overwhelming. There's a reason why the talk about it in the news is so panicky, is because it's like, wait, slow down. This is happening too fast. But we don't want to be panicky with our patients, because we know if we start judging them or feeling like, telling them what to do, they often shut down. So I really just show this to say, okay, it's normal to feel like this is overwhelming. It's just happening faster than humans have ever had to adapt to technologies in history. And I don't even want to talk about AI, because that's getting even faster. The other reason this is so hard to talk about with families is that it's so complicated. It's social media for kids and teens and young adults represents this just ton of contradictions. It's a place where they follow the most amazing, celebrities or leaders who say inspirational things, or give them quotes about nature, or help them feel understood and accepted. It's also a place where toxic trolls kind of go after people or make terrible comments about other people's bodies. It's a place where you might find hilarious videos or great, pasta recipes. It's a place where you're suddenly fed a self-harm video, or you see something terrible that makes you feel bad. So that is why there's this really complicated mix of people reporting, I love this and I hate this. It's great for me, it's terrible for me. I interview parents for some of my research, and they say the same things, like, I need this for social support, but I wish Facebook wouldn't, have all this political stuff in it, or I wish that people weren't trying to perform all the time. And so we also want to just help families understand there's a reason it's hard to give, one size fits all guidance about this, because it is this mix of good and bad. And part of that is the business model that underlies it. People, they're trying to get more clicks, and that means that more of the garbage is going to try to trend and get your attention. And so that's why it feels hard to get the most positive experiences out of technology. And talk about your own experiences. We are all going through this together. So sometimes I'll, to level the playing field a little bit, talk to kids about like, yeah, you know what? I joined TikTok for a little while, and it's interesting. Sometimes things are hilarious. Sometimes they're really, everyone's, dropping curses and, saying things that are really sassy. And it's just frustrating to not feel control over what lands in my feed. The other point I want to make is that this is so different from other technologies because it's mobile. And that means that kids can have these social media feeds anywhere, in the car with you, so you can't talk to them, or in their bedroom, so you don't know what's going on there. So it feels like a black box to families. And this is also relatively new. Like, I graduated from med school the year that the iPhone was introduced. So we're really trying to adapt as parents, as clinicians, to new technologies that they're hard to research, and they are moving really fast, and they're disrupting things in good and bad ways in our households. So just want to lay that groundwork for this is really complicated. It's not going to be easy. I love cartoons, so I'm going to put in a couple of cartoons, so I hope you don't mind. But one of the things I want to talk about in this talk is how to interpret the research on social media and kid mental health. And what is the strong, what is the weak evidence, and what you should take away from this. One of the issues I really have with the way we study media is that we really rely on screen time measures where we ask parents to recall how much, how many episodes of, cartoons or Sesame Street did your child watch yesterday? And that was fine in the 80s when most kids were watching TV. But if we're studying the current social media environment by asking how much screen time do you have, or do you have a cell phone or not, that is way too blunt of a measure. And it's not going to help us as clinicians, because the only answer we'll have then is restrict your screen time, which is not, it's not nuanced enough. So, some of the screen time or social media research started with some of these publications from Jean Twenge's lab. And many of you have seen these sorts of graphs in the news about social media and smartphones and child mental health, and showing these really rapid slopes and increases in depressive symptoms at the same time that social media use and internet hours also increase. So these are correlational over time. This is the weakest form of research. It does help us generate hypotheses to say, what is going on here? Why is there this sudden increase on that red line over there of depressive symptoms and curls? What's going on? Is it the internet and social media? Is it school shootings? Is it income inequality? Let's figure out what sort of societal trends are going on here. The other thing that's hard about relying on this research to say, what, iPhones have ruined everything. Ever since they've been released, all these 8th, 10th, and 12th graders say they feel really lonely. But the hard part is that we can't put the genie back in the bottle and say, okay, well, we can't de-invent the iPhone. The iPhone is here. How do we study it in more nuanced ways to help us understand the ways that the mechanisms on how it might be impacting kids' loneliness, kids' depression, and kids' mental health. Now, when you look at a whole of all, there have been meta-analyses of all of the screen time research where they have surveyed kids or their parents and asking about how much time are you spending on social media and what are your depression symptoms or your well-being symptoms. And over the whole population, the correlations between social media time and mental health are really small. And that's what feeds into this debate of does it matter? Does it not matter? It only explains less than 1% of the variation in adolescent depression or well-being. And so part of that makes sense in that you'd say, yeah, of course, poverty matters and parenting matters a lot. And there's school success matters and all the other, stresses they might be under. But there's a couple of reasons why this, on the population level, it's not impacting all kids the same. There's also been studies where they look day by day, how much time are you spending on social media and what are your mood symptoms or your well-being symptoms day to day. And those haven't been correlated either. So a day that you spend a lot of time on social media does not mean that's a day where you're more depressed or you feel great. So, okay, so let's say that time is probably not the best measure here. Certainly, it's probably a U-shaped curve where in the moderate range of an hour or two a day isn't as bad. But when you get up to 4, 5, 6 hours a day on social media, that probably means that child or teen doesn't have a lot of other opportunities. They don't have a lot of other interests. They're not sleeping well. The other thing that is important is that recall of social media screen time is not that accurate. So maybe this is just a lot of statistical noise that's making everything look like it's null. The last really important problem is that most of the research is cross-sectional. That means it's one slice of time where you're looking at what are the mental health symptoms and what is the social media use. And then you can't figure out the causality. Are depressed kids going on social media more because they're lonely, because they are looking for attention, because they're looking for a laugh? Or is social media causing more depression? So next, I'm going to show a couple, higher quality studies that show us a little bit more of what might be going on. This study was from, I think it was over 10,000 children in the United Kingdom. who were all these different ages from ages 10 to 20 in the United Kingdom, where they had longitudinal data. So they had followed these kids for years and years. And at every time point, they asked about well-being, which is that the curve. So if you're below 0 on that curve, this means lower well-being. Up here is higher well-being. And they split it apart by females and males. And they were looking at whether from 1 year after, if you used a lot of social media the year before, were your well-being scores different a year later? So you could see here that for girls, especially between age 11 and age 13, the more they were using social media in those younger tween years, the following year, their well-being was lower than average. The reason that sort of longitudinal component of like time 1, I measured this, time 2, I measured this, it matters because you get a little bit more sense of, oh, they're probably related, one causing the other, one preceded the other. And then there's also for both boys and girls, males and females, this dip around age 19, which is interesting. Maybe that's like when they are, finishing high school, going into this transition into early adulthood, when, stresses are higher, they're more on their own, maybe they're at college or in their first job. Now for males, that developmental window of more sensitivity was more between age 14 and 15. So not sure exactly why that is. But this at least tells us, okay, maybe this gives us more guidance to say, especially with our female patients, to say, before they turn 10, to say to families, what's your plan for getting a smartphone and for social media? Because kids sign up without their parents even knowing. It's really easy to get through the age gate. Letting them know that, for the younger girls, this actually has been linked with worse well-being. It's probably because they're seeing lots of idealized body types. The girls compare themselves much more. They're much more focused on appearance for their identity at those ages. And maybe that's where the window where that's happening more with males, because males too, see influencers and these idealized male body types too, and it can decrease their well-being. I also want to point out that in this same study from the UK, the relationships were bidirectional. So you had life satisfaction was associated with more social, so worse life satisfaction was associated with more social media use, and more social media use was associated with worse life satisfaction. So that's those same windows, the younger females, the kind of middle teen boys, but then kind of similar dip around ages 13 to 15 when it came to, if you weren't too happy with your life, you spent more time on social media. So the takeaway from this is, like, if you have a patient who you're a little worried about, they're more moody, they're more reactive, they've always had more tantrums, more issues in school, you might want to be a bit more proactive about guidance with them about, okay, like, what are your activities? What are you interested in? What makes you feel good? How do we keep some boundaries around technology? Keep it social, keep it fun and positive, and start conversations earlier with families about trying to keep some positive boundaries around this. And social media accounts, keeping them, if teens feel like they're ready, keep them in the teen years rather than starting under age 13. I do want to say, though, that a strict age cutoff, there's a reason that the AAP, we haven't set a strict age cutoff, like wait till you're 16 or wait till you're 13, is because every kid is different. And you might have some kids who can handle social media earlier, and you have some kids who can't handle it at all, in their teenage years. And so we really have to take a more individualized approach to try to understand, do you have the maturity, the impulse control, do you feel secure in your identity? Here's a little bit more on the research that I wanted to talk about in terms of what are better measures, not just how much social media is used, but how social media are used. So around nighttime hours, having the phone in the room with you, using it but before bed, that in meta-analyses has been linked with poorer sleep. So the more we can encourage the device curfews and encouraging if kids really can't like give up their phone at night, at least they're using some sort of meditation audio instead of looking at TikTok. Those are the sorts of modifications that we can try to partner with kids to make so they can get better sleep. There's been some research looking at, are you a passive social media user? Are you an active social media user? So a passive user is more of a scroller. I just kind of watch, or I doom scroll, versus active social media participation means you're posting and you're commenting and you're hopefully participating in a community where you get this like bidirectionality with positive support, rather than just kind of watching other people perform, which has been shown to negatively affect your self-perception. Cyberbullying, just like bullying in real life, and they often kind of cross over from real to social media life, has been consistently linked with more anxiety, depression, suicidal suicidal thinking. So addressing bullying early on, and opening conversations so that kids know that they can go to their parents if something like that happens. They're not ashamed of it, because it does bring a lot of shame when someone's being terrible to you, or people are teaming up on you, or you're getting random toxic comments, or seeing toxic content. It's hard to talk about because kids blame themselves for it. So it's really important to open up channels of communication so that kids know they can go to their caregivers about it. And like I said before, there have been several studies linking exposure to idealized body and beauty content and body dissatisfaction. So how eating disorder content, pro-Ana content has been on the internet since the internet came about. It's been a place that, even though the companies try to take down a lot of the pro-eating disorder content, it keeps popping up. The biggest frustration is that it's not even pro-eating disorder content. It's just the fact that, influencers and celebrities and everything else that are, kind of showing off their plastic surgery or other sort of unrealistic beauty ideals still can be internalized by youth. Now, at the same time, there is evidence that the positive effects, especially for kids who are from more marginalized groups, kids from LGBTQ+ groups, kids who have chronic illnesses and need to talk with others who are going through the same thing as them. Many kids have said that social media is a place where they find good information about mental health. This has been shown to have beneficial effects. So we don't want to take this away altogether, but we do want to be more careful about how technology is designed and how it is being experienced by kids. I think some of my favorite research is more ethnographic, meaning it's just based on interviews and really in-depth exploration with kids of how this feels to them. So if you have time on your hands, and I know you probably don't because you're busy clinicians, but this I found a really easy and good read. It just came out last year. It's by two Harvard School of Ed experts who interviewed hundreds of kids, teens, to understand what their experiences were. And I loved it because it was complicated, that even though this is a fun place where they find their friends and they discover things about the world and they, find new communities, it also feels like constant bombardment. Sometimes it feels like a job to keep up with all the snaps that are sent at them. They feel like there's lots of interruptions. And then Common Sense Media has also done some interesting work interviewing girls about what they think about social media. And they really say, like, why do all of these strangers have access to me? Why is all this content being fed to me when I really don't want it? Like this quote about eating disorder content. So I take away from that social media really needs to be designed better, because it's this space that's now been built into the fabric of our businesses and our communities. It's how libraries tell us what's going on. It's how schools tell us what's going on. It is small businesses rely on it. Politicians rely on it. Social media is not something that we can just say like this has to go away. but it can really be designed better with more understanding of how kids are doing. And so next I'm going to talk a little bit about how to think about the design features of social media and what could be better. And from a public health standpoint, this is Tom Frieden, who is the CDC director about a decade or so ago, who talked about the public health impact pyramid, where if you're only doing counseling and education, like, you know, the screen time guidelines or talking to families in clinic, you're really not having great population impact. You're just asking every individual family to change their behaviors and to, you know, try to have a more positive experience or try to talk more about social media. I think for better public health, you need to change the context. You need to change the environment so it makes individuals' default decisions healthy. So this is like in New York City, when they banned trans fats from all the restaurants, it led to a change in cardiovascular mortality. It's like, you know, creating more access to healthy food for families. It's like making it easier to bike to work instead of taking the car. These are all design changes in the environment that are better public health. And so I've really been advocating for policy change because we really need better digital environments for kids that aren't constantly nudging them to stay on and watch more. So I'll just take about 5 minutes to talk about what some of those design features are before we get to some clinical takeaways. So this is part of my research. This is not social media, but this is some of what I do in my lab, which is studying the digital design of the apps and platforms that kids are using the most. So in my research, we track kids' tablets and smartphones, and we see what are they spending the most time on. And then we download and play those games. Because I want to study, okay, what is a child offered? What are they fed when they first go in the App Store or on YouTube? And I've taken screenshots, like hundreds of screenshots of all the sorts of digital designs that are manipulative, that are encouraging kids to play more or longer, that are encouraging them to pay more money. These are very, very common. And so we've analyzed the advertisements that pop up in the middle of kids' apps. And we've also looked at when there's like pressure to make a purchase. So in this one, Strawberry Shortcake is like, she literally says, like in the voiceover, like, oh, I want the cake with the blueberry dye. And then if you don't buy it, see, it's locked. You have to pay like $1.99. And if you don't buy it and you just use the free orange dye, she's like, oh, that's okay. You can eat it. So she acts disappointed in you. So this is called parasocial relationship pressure, where you know, a trusted character is like, come on, buy something. In this one, Miraculous, this is a screenshot where my research assistant hadn't played the game in a while. And so it kept getting messages, notifications from Miraculous being, come on, come back to the game. Paris is in danger. Get your rewards. So we coded all of these different little gimmicks and tricks that are trying to get kids to re-engage with a game, even if it's not what the child wanted to do. And then this one, you know, characters who cry when you don't get the paid version of something, right? So these are all, we call them manipulative design techniques that are just these little design nudges that go too far, that are not appropriate for how a child thinks or plays. But because you have interactive design, you have all these different nudge techniques that can get you to spend more money, or they fabricate time pressure. If you've ever been on like a hotels.com sort of website, they're like, oh, 57 other people are looking at this property, you better book now. So all of that are different interactive gimmicks that try to get people to make purchases and re-engage. So we definitely see it in kids' apps, and we definitely see it on social media too. The only social media that my lab has researched is YouTube. We've watched hundreds and hundreds of hours of YouTube. We partnered with Common Sense Media and had families submit their child's YouTube viewing histories. So we watched all the videos that all of these 0 to 8-year-olds had viewed. And we found lots of low quality content. We've also tracked kids' mobile devices and found that the ones who watch YouTube watch it for like an hour a day. It takes up a lot of time because YouTube videos are both long and they're really engaging in ways that are kind of, again, like gimmicky and sticky. When YouTube videos have been analyzed through content analysis, We have found, and other researchers have found, that branded content like, hey, look, I'm Elsa, here's my Elsa princess dress. Here's all of these toys. Here's this fast food and these candies. These are really, really common in kids' influencer videos, which is what all three of these are. And experiments have also shown that when kids watch influencer videos where kids are eating unhealthy foods, they then eat more unhealthy foods. So it is influencing kids' preferences. And unfortunately on YouTube, you can find educational content on it. It's just not what trends or what is recommended to kids. So, we've come away from our YouTube analyses thinking the same sort of mechanisms are going on here, where content creators are competing for attention. So they try to put the most engaging stuff in their videos, like, hey, chocolate, hey, and then they try to get kids to re-engage in different ways. And that they want to trend so they can get more clicks, and that gets them more ad revenue. And then if you're something that's just like calm and educational, like Daniel Tiger, you get far fewer views on YouTube than something like some of these influencers. This is some interesting research out of the UK where they tried to analyze the digital design in apps like Instagram, Snapchat, and TikTok that also are a little bit manipulative in that they encourage, they exert time pressure, or they encourage more engagement. So the reason I present these is that it's good to have a little bit of a lexicon of like snap streaks. Like, why do those give us this pressure of like, oh my gosh, I need to go back and, click that. So this research team created accounts pretending that they were a bunch of teenagers, and they took screenshots of a lot of the different content that they were offered. They actually found that within days of opening an account as posing as a teen, these adolescent avatars received direct messages from accounts that they didn't follow, including being added to group chats with strangers and contacts from marketers of things like pornography or diet products. So this paper was actually really influential in getting Instagram and TikTok to change some of their privacy settings to make sure that when kids open a social media account, they're not instantly bombarded with strangers and marketers. But there still are these parts of the design that give you this pressure of like, come back, come back, Paris is in danger. But instead, it's like Instagram, it's like, come on, this person started a live video, watch it before it ends. Look, all these people are live right now. It gives you this sense of like, oh no, I'm going to miss out if I don't engage right now. They also do design that reduces friction. So if you've heard this term, friction is the digital interfaces, their goal is to be frictionless so that you can use them really easily, swipe right away, and you're immediately kind of granting access to new things. So all of these have these like really easy, frictionless interfaces like autoplay or swiping. They often quantify kids' popularity or relationships to try to get them to perform more and to try to gain more attention. Or they may encourage more contacts. Like every time you're watching something, you get this little, oh, you should follow this person. Oh, you should connect with this person. So again, it just creates the default setting of watch more, connect more, like more, because that helps these platforms reach their business goals of more contacts, bigger networks, more data collected, more ads shown. But at the same time, these are the sorts of things that kids are like, oh, I guess I should do this. I should have more friends, right? I should want more likes, right? Even though that may not be the most natural way that kids have relationships with each other. The other thing we're doing in our research is looking at what sort of algorithms, how algorithms are shaping the recommendations feed. This is just a screenshot from YouTube. So you can see it's all a little bit ridiculous, but this is the sort of stuff that trends because people want to get click through. And algorithms also shape kids' decision making. This is a screenshot from my son's school Chromebook, where he went into Google to search for something, and he immediately got this list of trending searches, like the plane that disappeared or ballistic missiles, right? So this is so easy for a child to get derailed into like, ooh, let me follow what's trending rather than let me follow what I was looking for. And that's a big ethical question. Should algorithms and interfaces like shape our child's decision making, or should we give them more autonomy when they are on a school Chromebook, for example? And then finally, I'll just talk a little bit about all of these nudges and design techniques. That's what occurs on the surface, but there's a lot occurring under the surface in terms of data collection, making inferences about kids like, this kid seems to love, pictures of sexy females. This person seems to love making in-app purchases at 11 p.m. This person seems to love diet products. Those are the inferences that can be made that influence what ads they see or what content they see. And a lot of those inferences may be things kids don't even know about themselves. So I just want to show you this is, as of 2020, these were the like 5,000 or 8,000 different companies that collect, analyze, and create marketing approaches based on our data. And as of 2023, it was over 11,000 companies. So this is this kind of invisible infrastructure of the internet that is trying to understand us, profile us, and sell things to us. And so a lot of the policy solutions involve saying, hey, let's not do this for kids. Because if we're constantly profiling kids and trying to get them to click more things and buy more things, and that's going to lead to more of the harms and less of just the good stuff of being on social media, finding a community that understands you, laughing with your friends, getting updates from your teacher, all that sort of, more adaptive and positive reasons that you might want to have some social networking with your community. Okay, so I'll wrap up by talking about what we're thinking with the new Center of Excellence in terms of how should we message about this to families? How should we talk about this in clinic? And how do we distill the fact that this is an anxiety-producing topic? This is a topic where generations from grandparents to parents to kids grew up with entirely different technologies. And if we take, I love this cartoon because it's like, in my day, blah, 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 right? If we take this intergenerational, I don't understand you, your guys are all a mess. That's not supportive of mental health, right? Because in order to support mental health, we have to understand each other and we have to be curious about what each other are going through. And so if we take an approach of like smartphones have destroyed a generation and kids are just being, addicted, we're afraid that is going to shut down the conversation. It's going to make this feel more stigmatized. It's going to make it feel, even though there is an urgency right now, if we're speaking with panic, and especially in the news media, research has shown that the more panicky or negative messages are in the news media, the more stigma people feel about mental health, the more hopeless people feel about issues like cyberbullying. So these are just some screenshots of like, I searched before this talk, like what are the, what are the headlines? The headlines are all or nothing. They're like, why is this so chaotic? And we'd rather not communicate with clickbait headlines, right? We'd like to communicate with some nuance, and we'd like to communicate in a way that make families feel less ashamed and more action oriented. And if we talk with a panicked narrative, we're worried that parents and youth feel ashamed of their media use. I don't know if you see this in clinic, but I certainly do, where parents are like, oh, it's just screen time. Like, I'm sorry. And you know what? I'm like, this is, lots of media is fun. Lots of social media is giving kids an outlet, a developmentally appropriate outlet for identity formation and for connecting with their peers. It's just that these multi-billion-dollar companies have decided they want to occupy that same space and make some money off of it. And that's more of the problem. So, if we're talking with panic and stigma, that closes us off from each other's experience rather than having more of a growth mindset where we're like, this is hard, but let's talk about it. If you focus solely on topics like screen time or addiction, I worry that locates the problem in the child, not the environment, right? We need to talk about this as, I've heard Frances Hagen talk about it as like, it's a systems failure. It's a design failure because it's actually not meeting the needs of kids the way it could. And we can't have solutions that are just about removing or restricting technology, because that's ignoring all the multi-layer contextual factors that shape kids' mental well-being. And we also have to understand our impulse may be to protect kids and teens from themselves and be like, these risky teens. But we were all teens once too. It's hard to remember what it was like to live in that sort of mindset. But if we can support their agency and autonomy and say, I understand you, or I'm going to try to understand you, and I'm going to help you feel in control of this, that is a more appropriate framing than saying you're at risk. This is bad for you. So our new framework is really trying to emphasize kids' innate resilience and the fact that kids are unique and they're awesome and they're really curious. They're attracted to novelty. They want reactions from their peers. All of that is developmentally adaptive, but it doesn't always mix well with highly monetized social media platforms. It recognizes that we need to act now to help youth through the mental health crisis, but we just don't want to reinforce the dominant polarized discourse where people are just yelling at each other, which is like social media, like I'd rather this feel like, hey, we're in a clinic visit together and we're talking and we get each other. And we're really trying to use evidence that centers youth as the critical point of view, not only adults, because youth are the ones experiencing it. These are the 5 aspects of our framework that we've come up with that talk about centering the child. I'll go through each one of these. Centering the child, not only talking about, technology or evil tech companies. Taking a developmental lens where we start earlier to talk about this. Understanding the importance of context, meaning how are parents using media? What other opportunities does the child have in their community? Understanding individual differences, that some kids are gonna have a harder time with social media, others are gonna have an easier time. And then also really understanding all the digital ecosystem design issues that I talked about. That most of these large platforms that are popular with kids, they were not designed for kids. They were designed by adults, for adults. And so they come with all of these assumptions about the way adults see the world, but don't understand the way kids often see the world. So we are here as pediatricians saying, hey, we get kids better. So we want to reframe this around the way that we know they develop mental health. Sorry if you hear my dog barking in the background. Okay, so concept 1 of like, how do we just support the child? We support their autonomy and their agency. How do you handle, your digital citizenship? How do you handle being part of your community without being a troll, without reacting too much? Helping teach kids how to self-regulate. We have a youth advisory panel that's also going to be helping us on this to make sure our messaging is really about how do we help kids be, really have their hands on the wheel, that they are the ones driving a positive relationship with media rather than just reacting and feeling like they just have to they're bombarded all the time. So a few clinical takeaways that, talking points that you could have when it comes to, trying to support the child's autonomy is really about like, hey, who are you? What are you good at? How do you calm down when you're upset? What are the things that you love to do that really make you feel awesome? And what happens when your device sucks you in longer than you intended? This is, and trying to remove the fault all from being like, you're using your phone too much, to actually saying, hey, I know that you want to have a healthy and balanced relationship with technology. Tell me what it feels like when you get sucked in, because I've gotten sucked in too. And then it's an hour longer than I intended to be on there. So reframing a little bit to be like, yeah, sometimes these devices manipulate us. How do we get past that? But sometimes they're awesome and they're hilarious. And you, as the young person, tell us, what do you need for this to be better? It's normal for parents to overreact or just try to avoid the conversation because it feels too hard. So instead, trying to help families have more of a growth mindset that like use these fails, these like tough moments, these, times when, for example, my when my son, when he was 11 on remote learning, like went down this rabbit hole that started at YouTube, at Pokemon unboxing videos and wound up at serial killer videos. Like, thanks a lot, YouTube. And that we used it as a learning moment where I was like, and I could try to like self-regulate myself and be like, why do you think they did that? Why do you think that those are the recommended videos? Why does that stuff trend? How else would you manage that next time? How do you resist clicking on that thing, right? So use it as a teaching moment, and helping youth and caregivers decide what is worth their attention. Like, there's so much junk and filler out there. Filler meaning like people just make these long videos just so they can get more ad revenue. How do you decide what's worth your time and not have things waste your time? So this is just new ways of asking questions in clinic. If you were like, hey, tell me about, who do you follow? What do you like about social media? What drives you crazy about it? Those are questions that center the child's agency rather than saying, how much time are you spending on that? You know, why can't you put that down? Taking a developmental lens means that you would start talking about emotional relationships with parents, with screens. They all start in infancy. So you'd probably start talking about, like, how do you calm your infant down? How do you help your child fall asleep at night? And having proactive solutions with a growth mindset when problems arise. And so these are, supporting, as the AAP and other groups are doing, supporting early emotional and relational processes, like emotional awareness. How am I feeling? Are you in the red zone? Are you in the green zone? You know, what can you do to calm down? What sort of sensory input can you get? Can you read a book? What do you do when you feel so mad or so bored? How do you resist not just like picking up a device and going into your room? And then how do you have activities that give you some social reciprocity and teach you about yourself? Are those board games? Are those a dance class? Is that other things that really give you the things that social media may be giving you on kind of a surface level in some cases? And so the clinical takeaways for this, like I said, is talking about healthy relationships with media in early childhood. So kids don't set these norms of like, oh, this is just what I grab when I'm feeling upset. This is my favorite toy, right? Ask parents, what sort of norms and values do you want your kids to build about life in general or about media? Like I said, in addition to how much time, talk about use of media to calm down and fall asleep without having an external way of soothing. And normalize the fact that, yes, devices work really well to provide immediate relief from emotions, but that doesn't help young people develop emotional skills in the long term, right? So a child who depends on media to calm down might become a teen who depends on media to calm down. And that's when it's worth it to talk about some therapy, talk about some other ways of coping with strong emotion. When it comes to context, recognizing that social media doesn't occur within a vacuum. So we've got to talk about how kids are coping with the stresses in their community. Are they using social media to try to join an online group about gun violence prevention? Are they talking about climate change? Are they talking about racism? These are the ways that they feel like they're trying to solve the problems. And you want to also give them outlets in their community to do that. Do you want to volunteer here? Do you want to have some more activities with your parents so your parent gets off their device? So in terms of this, like, this is really about affirming what the family is already doing well to support the child's mental health, but also suggest additional opportunities that give the child a sense of meaning and that they're helping and they're coping. Talk about, how do they talk about media rules at home? How do you talk about, what are your communication strategies? Do you immediately start yelling at each other? Do you just grab it out of their hands? Or do you sit down and actually talk about this? Is this working for us? And then I think helping parents understand the drivers of teen social media use, such as, what do you think makes him want to grab his phone? What makes you want to grab your phone? Talk about those sorts of things, because chances are parents are experiencing it too. When it comes to individual differences, I care a lot about this as a developmental pediatrician. So I know that kids have a lot of different strengths and challenges. Some of them do not, impulse control does not come easily to them. Kids from different races and gender identities and sexualities have very different experiences online, often receiving more harassment, but also finding more support from communities. So That's our chance as pediatricians to say, I know you have known you since you were a baby. You know, what are your strengths and challenges? You know, what are the most inspirational things you see online? What's the most toxic? How do you take breaks from social media? How does that feel? Help build their insight into that, how they, as an individual human, relate to these technologies. And I like saying, like, some kids have an easy time with social media. It's no big deal. Others have a really hard time. Which one sounds more like you? What's unique about you that contributes to that? Or talk about other kids. Like my 13-year-old was just talking about one of his friends who's really impulsive and like won't get off his phone. And, you know, I just use those not to judge, but just to be like, well, I wonder why he's doing that. Maybe it's because he loses Magic the Gathering all the time and he wants to avoid that. Since that's what my geeky son does with his friends. And finally, helping kids be critical of this digital ecosystem that was designed for adults, not for kids. So I know it's running near 8 p.m. So I'm just going to wrap up here by saying, let's ask questions like, how do you wish Instagram was designed better? What do you wish TikTok would let you go to sleep? How do you wish that was designed better? Do you ever feel like it's making decisions for you or it won't let you go? What does it feel like when you've been on too long? These are things that I hope will help kids develop more of a sense of like, what is my relationship with this technology, and not just go on autopilot when they're on social media, but really be more minds on. And to really critique influencers. Like if parents are struggling, how do I even talk about this? You know, find some like ridiculous influencer or some sort of trend that's going on and talk about and ask kids their opinions. They have opinions and say, what do you think about this? Why would they post that? And just listen, helping parents to just take some breaths and listen and not judge, not jump in, so they can start to hear about their child's digital world a little bit. And that sets the stage for kids knowing I can come to you. You're not going to judge me. You're not going to take my phone away. That those conversations are just probably the number one thing. If you take away anything from this talk, it's to encourage calm, open-minded conversation where parents don't overreact, kids don't feel as much shame, and that they have this kind of like, okay, what do you want to try about this? Have some try some experiments where kids take the lead on saying, you know what, I'm going to stop using as much TikTok at night. I'm going to put on some YouTube, calm sounds. And we'll do it for a week and we'll see how it feels at the end of the week. And we'll keep open this conversation because it's not easy. There's no silver bullet to help make this easier. We're going to keep working at the Center of Excellence. We're doing lots of like focus groups, and we have a Q&A portal where parents or clinicians or anyone can submit their questions, and we're answering them with evidence-based reviews. We're doing echoes and other training modules to help anyone who works with kids, and we're also engaging with industry and government to keep asking for more systems-based change. So I'll wrap up here. Here's just, this is a QR code to that Q&A portal. I'll distribute these slides to you, but you can also encourage families to submit their questions. We also have the family media plan from the AAP, which Dr. Moreno and I helped design, which goes through a lot of the tips I talked about. There's a lot in there, so just tell parents to like pick a few things that they want to work on. And then I like these two following, newsletters from either Screenagers Movie or Common Sense Media, because they just help parents feel like they're more up to date on this like rapidly changing digital world. Okay, I'm gonna stop sharing and open it up for questions.
Well, Jenny, that was amazing. I feel like I have so much to learn personally as a clinician about social media and how we can interact with our patients, but you at least gave me a clue of what I don't know. The first thing I want to ask you about is, what do you know about or feel about the Protecting Kids on Social Media Act that was introduced into Congress by Congress members Schatz and Murphy and Cotton, where they propose that children under 13 should be prohibited from social media, and from 13 to 18 have parental consent?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And technically with our center, we're not endorsing specific bills or things like that, but we do definitely take the approach of it's better to change the design of the platforms and have them be more accountable to child well-being rather than only restricting access. Because our biggest concern is that if, you know, for the kids who are most at risk, let's say they are, you know, exploring their gender or sexual identity, they are in a family that is more abusive or harsh, they're not going to get, they have a much less likely chance that their caregivers are going to give them access to this platform that could then help them find a community that helps them cope. It's also just the general idea of like, okay, we're just going to restrict kids from this, or are we going to support them in having a better experience on there? So I've been working with the AAP on advocacy for the Kids Online Safety Act, KOSA, which is from Blackburn and Blumenthal. And that is more like the UK and the EU. They have regulations that are more about helping reduce the risks. So making tech companies say, all right, I'm going to do what's called an audit to see, am I recommending self-harm content to teens? Do I even know who's a teen on my platform? Am I, you know, did I just changed a design feature? Did it accidentally like increase the amount of eating disorder content that kids are seeing? The problem with all of these automated platforms that are just like automating feeds through algorithms means there's no one watching and auditing to say, oh, how many times did we recommend something harmful to kids? So that sort of double checking safety mechanism is the most important thing to me. That's more about changing the default settings so that kids are not being offered as much risky content.
Safeguards. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's more improved design rather than just, you know, keeping kids out. Because the other more practical argument is that kids are totally going to find ways to get access to those things otherwise, or it leads to more conflict in families where a child's like, I need to be here, that's where my friends are, and the parents saying no. And then it puts more onus on the parents to be these gatekeepers to platforms that they're worried about. So, you know,
I'm old enough to remember the emergence of rock and roll, and it feels like one of those moments where, you know, the younger people are having a generational gap from their parents.
yes, and that does always lead to a bit of a moral panic of like, what are they being exposed to? But I think that there's a difference between like rock and roll or other forms of art that have different messages about society, about sex, about all these different things that carry different norms across generations, compared to, you know, social media isn't, there's, you know, I don't know, I'm being judgmental about user generated content. A lot of it is lovely, but a lot of it is crap. And so the fact that we're more worried about the fact that these platforms are recommending and feeding you know, less
Negative
quality content
tropes,
to
yeah.
kids, you know, wasting their time is more the question here. So
I just took a trip upstate, and we had to stop in a park, and at the picnic table next to us was a group of teenage boys. And after they were finished, you know, roughhousing and stuff, and I saw them take out their cell phones and started creating content, I guess for TikTok, and they were doing things that I'm sure their parents wouldn't be happy with. And I was going, wow, this is happening right in front of me 4 days before this lecture. And I was going, timely.
I mean, and it's hard because you see kids kind of acting in groups all with their phones, and it's, you know, it's normal to have your initial impulse be like, what are they doing? What's wrong with these kids? Why do they find that fun? And so it's not that I'm not saying you're wrong for having that sort of reaction, but let's say it was your own patient or your own child or nephew or something, is to say, you know, take more the standpoint of like, tell me about that. What's that about? You know,
Right.
Tell me more about it. And then you, as their trusted adult, can help either be like, oh, that's actually hilarious what you're doing, or, well, that's kind of sexist, or like helping them, you know, see and become a little bit more of a critical either consumer or creator, and to see like, yeah, and I think that joining them where they're at will have a much more effective time in helping them understand the pitfalls here.
We
Um,
have, we have enough time. I know you have to
Yeah.
run to an important meeting, but just want to get to some questions. And if anyone has any questions, please put them in the Q&A and we'll try to get to them right away. From Adam Soto, how would you suggest encouraging your teens to make better choices with social media content while respecting their individuality and growth?
Yeah, I mean, I think that ties into what I was just talking about, is that the first step is going to be opening the conversation and meeting them where they are a little bit to try to understand why do they like that content, because you by having them show you their world a little bit or explain the influencers that they love, or like if they tell you the influencers they like and then you follow them and just explore it a little bit, it helps you not have an initial knee-jerk reaction of like, this is a bad choice, but explore it, get to know it, and then ask questions. Asking questions like, why do you think they post things that way? Or like, what, why do you think this person's so popular?
Right. Instead of being on the attack, be more
Sure.
yeah.
Shows that you respect their opinion,
Mhm.
that you are willing to see things from their perspective. And then you're also like meeting them where they are, so you can help with helping them make better choices. If actually you feel like, well, you're just attracted to this because it's kind of like garbage. So, and I think that the insight building when you're working with teens is like, if you come in hot and you're just like, nah, this is bad, that's just going to increase the shame and the avoidance of the conversation, compared to like, I respect your opinion, I just kind of want to talk about this, you're a smart kid, is going to then help them reflect and make their own choice more likely.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I don't see any other questions in the Q&A, and I know that Dr. Rudetsky has an important meeting. I just want to thank you again, Jenny, for coming and speaking to us. We really feel that it was a very important lecture and served us well. I want to just some housekeeping, go over that anybody who attended the lecture and was able to stay for the full lecture can get CME credit. If you registered, we will help you do that afterwards in an email. You'll be getting a survey. Please fill out that survey and then you'll be able to apply for credit. And if you are also looking for MOC credit and you are a board certified pediatrician, that can also be provided. So if you give us your AEP number in the email, then you will be getting that as well. I want to remind everyone again that on September 13th, we'll be speaking about motivational interviewing, so we can use those skills to help people use social media appropriately. And I want to thank everybody for attending Allied Physicians Group Mental Health Committee and our lecture series that is ongoing. And thank you very much for attending. Good night, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.